meeting. Today is a special session. We'll touch a little bit on that, but I'm really happy to see full house today and some really good friends from this community joining. Welcome, Ram. Really glad to see you here. Also, Jan, it's the first time at least I see you in this session, so welcome you all. Yeah, welcome all team, welcome Aussie again. We're glad to have you here. Awesome. Does any one of you would like to introduce yourselves? Or I know you are all friends with this community, but I was wondering for new folks, you wanted to introduce yourself, maybe Jan or Ram?
I'll go first. Hi, everyone. This is Ram. I'm part of the Cloud Foundry Foundation team. My big motivation to come today and join was because Chris is away for a week. So I just had to make sure that the recording was fine. But otherwise, really happy to see everybody here. We've obviously all met on different forums, but appreciate all the new energy that you're bringing in, David. Thank you for that. Happy to be part of the group.
Awesome. Thank you, Ram. And the fact that you're doing this and it's, I don't know, it's 8 p.m. for you, maybe?
It's
It's
actually a 11:30, so we are inching
oh
close to
man.
midnight. So
No, man. Thank you for doing this. Waking up in
For
the
me,
night
it's
just to
8.
check the recording. Awesome. Yeah, sorry.
So I'm Jan. I'm a product owner with the team at SAP. We are looking at Paketo Buildpacks, Cloud Foundry, cloud native Buildpacks in general, and I'm also happen to sit in the TOC of the CFF.
Welcome.
Mostly here because now like roadmap sounded very interesting, and I'm planning to join on a more regular basis. Also to other working group meetings.
Sounds great, Jan. Thank you for joining. Yeah. The big thing we want to share with you all today is it's proposal from the team. It was to turn the first working group meeting of every month, make it an open roadmap discussion, which is awesome. I was telling Ryan, I mean, I just wish some other projects will follow this example, because one thing is to build a roadmap and probably in the public and put it in a repo. A different thing is to consistently, every month, make sure that we are aligned with the roadmap. We are communicating the progress or the lack of progress on some stuff in the roadmap. This is great, and we hope this is useful for the existing and new contributors to the Paketo Buildpacks project. And I really appreciate that the team had this initiative. So because it's the first time probably we do this, at least that I'm aware of, Ryan proposed to facilitate this particular session, and I will be the note taker unless there's any objection. So yeah, I'll let Ryan lead from this point on.
Yeah, I can provide some more background on the kind of general thinking behind this particular version of the working group meeting. The steering committee, which consists of myself and Dan Makuza and Emily, who's also here, we've been talking for a bit about things that Piketto could be doing to try to bring in more contributors, to get more involvement earlier on, to get better user feedback about particular things that we want to produce as features. And one of the things that became pretty evident was it wasn't always clear to end users or people who could become contributors what it is we were working on. Even though these things were there, if you looked, it wasn't in one place and it wasn't clearly communicated. And so this is one part of that effort in the coming year for us to try to be a little bit better at as stewards of that kind of roadmap and making that discussion a little bit more open and gathering feedback from folks. So yeah, I think today what we're going to start with is a little bit of a review of what happened in 2021, because we did in 2021 a lot of stuff. And it's worth taking a look back and seeing what we achieved. And then we're going to talk about what's upcoming for 2022. Both of these things are going to be discussed in a couple very shortly to be published blog posts. And then from there, we can actually take a look at the current roadmap, the items we have that are kind of top of mind there, and we can kick off some discussion if that takes place. So to start a little bit with the review stuff, I'm going to hand it over to Emily, who's going to give us a little background on what happened last year.
Thanks, Ryan. While I talk through this, I'm going to share with you guys our draft blog post that we're going to be publishing in the very near future, as Ryan mentioned. So I know we're a little late into the year to be doing our 2021 recap and launch of 2022 roadmap, but it's been a strange year. So we're getting off to a little bit of a late start, but hopefully that won't impact us too much. So our themes from last year's roadmap were solidifying existing build packs, expanding the build pack ecosystem, and supporting non-production use cases. So just to summarize some of the work we got done on that front, we put a lot of effort into defining via RFCs and standardizing a bunch of options and practices across all of our build packs. So we moved from having a variety of types of configuration options to standardizing on environment variables wherever possible. And we also defined 4 options that exist in all build packs for things like log levels. We defined common interfaces to make sure that when anyone's picking up a Paketo build pack, they're getting a predictable experience whenever that's possible. We standardized our handling of versioning, some of the details of how we handle specific environment variables, like ones that are meant to configure tools that are orchestrated by the build pack. And we also included a set of utility build packs that provide common configuration options in all of our major language families. So we have these features that are reproducible across all the different languages. Another thing we did was, over the course of the previous year, we learned a lot about how to architect build packs in a way that makes them modular and composable and more useful. So we went back and did some work to restructure our Python and PHP build packs to take those learnings into account. Obviously, to anyone who's interacted with the Piketto build packs, we're not at perfect standardization yet. Like there's gonna be more work to do there to make sure all the build packs are using similar tooling and the same metadata schema. So even though this isn't a theme on the 22 roadmap, we're going to be continuing work in this vein. Next up, in expanding the build pack ecosystem, just want to call out, support for additional types of applications that we've added over the last year, including, whole language ecosystems like Python now has a top level build pack that we're supporting and recommend as being production grade. We've introduced into the Paketo community project support for Rust and also support for JavaScript front-end applications. We expect those to be promoted soon to the top level project. So there's some whole new ecosystem for supporting. And then within our existing ecosystems, we've done a lot of work with a lot of help from the community and some folks on this call to expand into supporting new use cases, new Java application servers, new JVM implementations, new build tools, new APMs, including Datadog, stuff like that. So we're pretty excited about all these new features. We definitely want to hear from folks who are using the build packs about what top priorities should be for upcoming expansion work. Another one of our major themes was supporting non-production use cases. So we added a watch exec build pack that can be used. It's a component that we've added into our larger build packs that allows folks to create images with reloadable process types. So you can use these, you can use this feature with a dev orchestrator like Tilt or Scaffold in order to rapidly iterate on changes and see them live update in a container in your production-like environment. We defined a common interface for enabling remote debugging, and we're working on rolling that out across all of our build packs. And then finally, a major theme that emerged during the course of last year that we did not necessarily plan for when we launched the 2021 roadmap is improved bill of materials support. I feel like secure supply chains have been a big theme in the industry over the last year. And the upstream CMB project launched a new feature to allow Buildpacks to contribute bills of materials in standardized formats like SIFT and Cyclone. And once that feature launched, we took that and ran with it and are trying to ensure that all of our build packs generate thorough, accurate bills of material in predictable formats. And we've rolled that out in Java, Node.js, and Go, and we expect to roll it out across the rest of the Paketo build packs in the coming year. This is not everything we've done in 2021, but these are some of the major highlights. And I just want to thank everyone for their hard work. I feel like it's when you step back, it's exciting to see how much we accomplished over the last year.
Awesome.
I'll hand it back to Ryan.
Yeah, Emily, you can, or I guess I'll share. Hold on a second. All right. Yeah, so scrolling down here, we get into the 2022 roadmap. So this is based on effectively the feedback we got from the discussion thread that was in our feedback repository. There's a lot of really great feedback. I think we ended up seeing a huge number of votes for a lot of things that you're going to see here at the top that are kind of the most important priorities for the year. So why don't we start with the first one here? I think probably the most voted for and the most requested sets of features had to do mostly with improving and updating and enabling more base images, stacks, and builders. We saw requests from folks asking for ARM64 support, for more support in particular OSs, more variant versions of Ubuntu. We saw requests for things like UBI, Red Hat's Universal Base Image OS as well. We're going to be planning to do a bunch of things on the roadmap in the next few months even to start to move the ball on this front. If you've been coming to the working group meetings recently, you probably have noticed there's a Jammy Jellyfish RFC that's already been approved and merged. That work is definitely going to be starting soon, in addition to some RFCs related to improving our tooling around how we build and maintain stacks going forward. Hopefully in such a way that it'll be much easier for people joining the community to contribute stacks as a thing, instead of it being something that's very much a dark art of the folks who are familiar with the project. So yeah, that's probably the number one thing we care about for 2022 is trying to make our stacks something that's a little bit more representative of what's going on in the general ecosystem, and embracing a bunch more kind of target OSs as well as architectures. The next one up here on the list is improving the Buildpack authoring experience. So we've seen a number of amazing contributions in 2021, folks contributing whole build packs, which has been really great to see. What we've noticed is that there's quite a big gap between that being entirely self-service, where folks can go ahead and just build a build pack and contribute it, versus what we're seeing is that we're having to do a lot more explaining than what's written in our documentation or what's visible in example repositories. So we're going to want to do a lot in the next year to try to improve that experience. We want Paketo to be a place where folks can come in, figure out how to build a build pack and contribute it, and be able to do that in a way that doesn't require a lot of support from the core team. That will be kind of a really big win if we can get to a place where someone comes in with a fully fledged build pack that we didn't have any real hand in because they were able to build the entire thing themselves. And so that's going to require quite a lot of stuff. Improvements to the actual tooling around how we build build packs, improvements to our documentation. And we're really interested in hearing from the folks who've built build packs in the past or contributed major features. Where are the places that we're deficient? Let us know. Those are things we're really interested in trying to improve on. And the last major theme that we have outlined here for 2022 is improvements to the way we manage dependencies and then how those dependencies are cached or made available for build packs. Today, there's a really strong coupling between Piketto build packs and the legacy Cloud Foundry build packs as far as dependencies go. Piketto is basically reliant upon a lot of infrastructure that is maintained by the Cloud Foundry build packs team. This has been something of an albatross for us as we've tried to move forward towards things like enabling the Jammy stack or moving to support other things like UBI or ARM64 support. We want to do that in a way that allows Paketo to kind of move freely and maybe move in a different direction than what Cloud Foundry Buildpacks is trying to achieve. And so one of the major things we're going to be doing very shortly is to look into how to decouple those dependency management systems from one another and make it so that Piketto's dependencies are built in such a way or made available in the build packs in such a way that there isn't a coupling between them and the existing Cloud Foundry build packs. We also want to make it really, really clear to outside contributors what the dependencies are, where they came from, how they're built. All of those things should be very transparent and clear to users. Again, to double down on what Emily mentioned earlier about supply chain vulnerabilities and understanding where things come from, making sure that the dependencies that appear in our build pack, that those are clearly defined where they came from and how they are built. I think that's a major goal for Paketo build packs in the next year. In addition to that, we want to make a bunch of improvements, and this is going to be just lots of small improvements across all of the build packs we have existing to try to reduce overhead in downloading and re-downloading and enable better caching mechanisms so that we're making sure that the actual building process, when you go to build a build pack or to build an app based on build packs, that that goes as quickly as possible and that our users have a really great experience. So that wasn't everything that was in the discussion. Those were just the kind of 3 top big areas that were that had a lot of votes that people were really interested in seeing some progress being made on. And so there definitely will be items that show up on our roadmap that are outside of these 3 themes. We'll continue to push forward on those things, but these are the main things we're focusing on starting this year. All right, I think from there, we're going to transition into actually looking at what is going on right now in the roadmap and how it relates to those particular themes. So the document I'm looking at right now is in the Paketo Buildpacks community repository. It's roadmap.md. And our goal with this meeting is to kind of review this document and make sure that it stays up to date and representative of what's actually happening and how those things are kind of like addressing the overall topics that we think are priorities for the year. So to start with, we've got this improving and expanding our base image, stack, and builder offerings. There are actually 4 RFCs that are currently in flight that we're trying to make progress on that are related to this particular topic. That is the Secure Runtime Environments RFC that landed last week, a RFC that defines a image retention policy, and then a couple RFCs related to improvements to our stacks. If you look at this page, you'll see links to both the original RFC as well as a tracking issue. The way that these tracking issues are structured is that they should have a short summary of what exactly it is we're trying to achieve, and then some explanation of where the particulars of the implementation are taking place. And so you should be able to, from any one of these particular roadmap items, click through and see top level summary of what's supposed to happen, and then some details about progress that's being made. All right, that being said, I kind of wanted to open the floor at this point to ask about these particular items. I think that these are the highest priority items that we have currently in flight. But I wanted to basically open up conversation if folks were interested in having the discussion about what's in here or questions about what they're seeing at the moment. Doesn't sound like there are questions here. I think in the long run, the hope is that this will continue to like evolve. None of these, excuse me, one of these is currently in flight, which is this particular issue here. We're going to be landing hopefully this particular thing soon. At a future, basically next month's roadmap meeting, we'll be able to go through and say, this thing is done or completed and remove things from the roadmap, in addition to making sure that the roadmap currently has all of the current pieces of work in flight on it. Okay, not hearing anything about these particular items, I was going to move on to the next section, which is improving the Buildpack authoring experience. So the one RSC that's on here is actually a relatively old one that's been outstanding. It just has kind of fallen off the priority list, but with it being a renewed theme, something that we want to try to achieve or do a better job on in 2022, I brought it back up here to the top. This was to auto-generate reference documentation. So today, if you look at any of the reference documentation on the Piketto website, all of that is written by humans. So when new flags are added, new environment variables are added, new features are added, we have humans go in and write all of the documentation explaining what those things are. What we'd like to see in the future is that for a lot of those things, especially the configuration options through environment variables, that those things can be automated. And we can keep those things up to date, providing people with more accurate documentation as far as what exactly it is that they're looking at. It will also bring us into better alignment across all of the build packs. So if all the build packs are declaring their documentation in this kind of auto-generated manner, then it will be easier for anyone to drop into any one of the build packs and look at that documentation and really understand what the build pack offers as features. All right, questions about this particular issue? It doesn't sound like it. The last topic we had was improvements to dependency management and caching. And so the thing here is not actually an RFC. It's a little bit earlier than that, which is it's an exploration or really an issue outlining what an exploration could look like. And this is basically an exploration around what I was talking about earlier about the coupling between the Cloud Foundry dependency management system and the Paketo dependency management system. So this is really for the team to spend some time looking at what the coupling between those things look like and how we could actually break that in a way that would allow Paketo to add a bunch of new support for new stacks and architectures, and then also make it more transparent and more easy for folks to contribute to. So if you're interested in that particular thing, please check out the issue related to the exploration. The folks who pick this up will definitely keep this issue up to date with what they're finding and ideas on what direction that might move in. So if this is a topic of interest for you, feel free to chime in there.
Just a quick comment from my side as a member of the TOC. The CFF TOC has some budget for CI related things that Paketo might be able to request or at least ask for. I'm not sure about the numbers, but if there's any need like that, I'd say probably you best join the TOC meeting on Tuesdays and come up with something. So if it's about that, there is some budget. And some of the other working groups are already like setting up concourses or similar infrastructure, thinking about how to share it and within what. And I think the limit seems currently to be somewhat within a working group. So I guess it would be okay for Paketo to have some own infrastructure there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great call out. All right. So that covers the things we talked about as kind of top level items, but there's also stuff we've already approved that we accepted as RFCs in the last year. And some of these have some ongoing work, others were accepted and mostly have sat there and we haven't made forward progress on them. And some of these are actually done, but we just haven't done the work to say, oh yes, this is crossed off the list. We're completely finished with this thing. So all I really wanted to say about this section is that the folks who are involved in doing a lot of the work, I think you should feel free to look through this list, figure out what's actually getting worked on, what's complete, what you maybe can make progress on going forward. And we should look about trying to close out some of these particular issues or making sure that their tracking issue is kept up to date with what the current progress is. Other than that, I think that if you're in the community and you're looking for things to work on, these are perfectly reasonable issues to try to help push the ball forward on. And so, for example, there is this RFC about remote debugging. If you are interested in contributing remote debugging to any one of the language families that is not currently checked off in this list, like there is a lot of space for contributions for what that could look like. So if you're looking to contribute something more substantial to the project, take a look at the roadmap, especially stuff in this kind of like older other open RFCs list. These are definitely things that are worth trying to push the ball forward on. All right.
There's two things from the very broad topics from the very top that we might want to talk about with in that regard, which is like maybe the jammy jellyfish things, like because we are already looking into building that stack. So at least partially we could try to do that just upstream, because like we've run actually like a stack as it comes from Paketo, and a version that uses 2004 and a version that uses 2204 through some of the vulnerability scanners, and are like actually up for looking forward to consume the one that has 0 known vulnerabilities, which is jammy jellyfish. So if we could just instead do that upstream, could be a thing. And the other is that for some of the build packs we've written, we have like kind of created our own, I guess like Gareth could say more to that, our own integration testing framework, and are currently considering moving over to Arkham, and while doing that, writing some README maybe for it, by understanding how it works, documenting it for others. So that could be some things
that would be great.
You might be seeing coming from us.
That would definitely fall in this improving the build pack authoring experience category for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you are interested, I would encourage you to like comment on this particular issue, saying, you know, here's what we're looking into. We're interested. How can we get started? That would be great.
Yep, will do.
All right. That's all I had planned as far as like our review of the current roadmap. I wanted to, I guess, open up the floor for any other conversation about roadmap items that seemed like we entirely missed or things that folks are interested in. This is kind of the remainder of this meeting can just be an open forum for us to discuss things that folks might be interested in that just weren't represented necessarily on the roadmap as it is today.
Right, well, I'll jump in there. I'm particularly interested in the bullet point that you had that doesn't have the stuff after it. That was the publish a full set of Paketo stack images compatible with IBM Red Hat Universal Base Image stuff. That's something I'm really interested in on a number of levels. As well, I'm also interested in it because I'm following the Buildpacks work to add extensions to allow you to install dependencies using the operating system stuff, because I'd like to be able to install like the runtime that I'm using, like Java, install that using equivalent of like RPM install Java rather than having a tarball that comes down instead, so I can get it from the upstream vendor for the OS that I'm using. So that's kind of my real interest and why I'm kind of here as part of this working group, is because I want to kind of like see what's going on with that. And if there's people who are already looking at or already interested in Paketo stack images on UBI, then yes, I would love to talk with you and lend a hand and see what we can achieve with that part of it.
Yes, this reminds me of something that I didn't clearly articulate that I wanted to make sure that I covered, which is how do we get things to show up on the roadmap here? If there are things that aren't there that you're interested in working on, how do we, collaborate around making sure that they appear somewhere in the roadmap and we can get those things moving forward? I would say, to me, the things that make logical sense as far as steps go is to start with a discussion in the feedback repository. So if you don't know where that is the Piketto Buildpacks /feedback repo. And there's a discussion forum that's underneath there. I can drop a link here in the chat. That's a really great place to just start the discussion. From there, I think the next obvious step is to open an RFC to basically outline what your plans are. Clearly, between those 2 points, there's probably quite a bit of exploration to try to figure out what exactly that RFC should look like. And hopefully that thing can happen both in the discussions actual thread itself, but then also if you're interested in just publicly putting information about an exploration somewhere so that it's actually addressable in some way that folks within the community can see. We have this Paketo community explorations repository whose purpose is entirely just to hold kind of exploratory documentation of, you looked into a particular thing, here's what we kind of found out. And, there are a couple of examples in there of previous explorations that have been done. So if that's useful to you as far as the kind of next step, then feel free to contribute an exploration there. But once you do get to a state where the RFC happens, I think things start to fall into a much more regular order that folks should be familiar with. The RFC will go through its standard process of approval and then acceptance, at which point we're going to make sure that that RFC appears somewhere on this roadmap document, and that we start up a tracking issue that will then let people figure out where the work needs to get done and keep track of the progress that's being made as that happens. So I think that kind of outlines what our plans are going forward. This meeting itself was kind of hastily planned in the last few days to make sure that we could get it in at the very first meeting of the new month. I am going to write up a bunch of thoughts on this and kind of directions for how stuff gets on the roadmap and make that thing a little bit more clear for people so we can point them at something that's written rather than having to maybe review the recording of this particular meeting, but basically to outline a little bit about what I just said. But yeah, so Ozzy, for you particularly, I would say if you haven't already gone to the discussion forum on the feedback repository, feel free to open an issue there and like start a conversation. I know there's like some other stack related stuff there, so it's entirely possible that this conversation is already happening. I just don't know about it.
Yeah, it looks like there's a comment from, I think it's Kevin, who's put one onto the interesting feedback on broader stack support topic. And there's a comment from there in there talking about UBI stack support. So I wonder if that's where, because I'm talking referencing the bullet point that you had in the presentation thing that you put up a minute ago, or the document that you had a minute ago that had the overview. You had a bullet point in there that mentioned UBI 8 particularly. So I suspect that that bullet point came from that comment on that thread there. So
I wonder if one of the things we could do is on the RFC repo, like we have tracking issues. Do we want another type of issue that's sort of like a pre-RFC placeholder? It's like something that we have as a community agreed to do, or maybe we've mentioned it in one of these themes just to say that, yes, we want to create an RFC for this. And then, you know, if for example, there are dependencies on upstream stuff, like we want you to contribute a UBI RFC, but you might have a better time once the stack refactor is done. Place to sort of track that tactical, are we ready for this RFC yet?
I think that's an entirely reasonable thing to do. You should not feel that you can't open an issue on the RFC's repo doing exactly that. So that's another place for sure that you can feel like you should be able to at least stake a claim or describe a level of interest in maybe working on a particular area for an RFC.
There's one a little longer reaching question I'd have, and we don't have to settle it now, but it's like, when we are done with Jammy Jellyfish, I'd actually like to see us picking up 2404 and not only 2604. But I guess we have some more time to talk about that.
I would 100% agree with you. I think we've hopefully will, as soon as the kind of work in refactoring our stack infrastructure to support something like Jammy goes forward, it will be considerably easier for us to build out and support many different kinds of stacks. And so I don't think there would be hardly any opposition to such an idea for us to basically support every Ubuntu LTS release that comes out. But yes, you should open an RFC about that. Okay, well, hearing yet more silence, I think that that basically concludes the discussion of the roadmap for this month. Next month, we're gonna, again, take a look at the items in the roadmap and from there, figure out kind of what next directions could look like. What are the new major pieces of work that we think the project should focus on? We have about 20-ish minutes left in the meeting. And I know that we had, at least last week and maybe this week, some remaining RFCs that we might have wanted to look at. So I think I'm going to hand the meeting back to David, and we maybe can at least discuss a couple of those with the remaining few minutes we have in the meeting.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, yeah, let me share real quick here. Okay. Yeah, outstanding RFCs. So first one will be RFC for a health checker build pack. This one from Daniel. It got some comments, written comments from Ailey. So
unfortunately, Dan's not here today to dive in. Yeah. My general thought was this seems like a good idea, but I'd like a little bit more detail in the RFC around, like, I think it'd be nice to have an example of how folks would be using this with Docker Run or Docker Compose, and then sort of also going into what kind of configuration options we would need in order to be able to set the endpoint that the health checker is reaching out to.
Okay, thank you, Emily. All right, next up will be extend.net SDK.
Yeah, I just saw the feedback from you, Emily, and some of the feedback from Andrew. I haven't had time to respond to either of those. I think that your request of me laying out a little bit more on what it means to be a .NET installation is fair. It's a bit hard to quantify because it is a bit of a moving target depending on the version, but I can give maybe a bit more of a rough estimation of what it looks like. And then I haven't had time to fully digest Andrew's proposal and either decide that it should be included in the RFC or come back with a counter argument.
I think for me, one of the big questions is, given we kind of want to work to decouple, dependency building from the way we did things in Cloud Foundry, as Ryan was laying out, like if instead of retooling how we're building .NET SDKs, do we just want to consume the upstream SDKs directly?
So yeah, this is almost effectively a stopgap to do that insofar as we are currently stripping out certain dependencies that that were like overlapped in how we were doing the build. This is effectively, if you go look at my spike, it is to change it to we're now consuming the release from Microsoft directly. That's the thing that's changing.
I think that's probably worth spelling out in the RFC itself. I didn't really notice whether or not that was clear because we've had so many synchronous discussions about this idea, but if that's not obvious from the RFC, I think it should be, because that's really the core of the idea, is just ship what Microsoft ships.
Yeah, when I read through it, I interpreted it as changing how we build things rather than redistributing the Microsoft.
Well, it is effectively changing how we build things insofar as we're just going to ship what Microsoft ships. But yeah, I think I can make that. I think I can just hit the nail on the head at that point.
Thank you. Okay, next up, RFC to update Bionic stack naming. This one's from Sophie.
This is a fairly short RFC. It spun out of the Jammy Jellyfish RFC that Ryan put up last week. And essentially, that RFC laid out some different naming structures for the repos and how we tag the images for Jammy Jellyfish going forward. So in an effort to, just be consistent and across the two stacks or sets of stacks that we will be supporting, I wanted to put in this RFC that just kind of explains all the different places that we will be publishing our Bionic based stacks for the time being. And that's about it. There aren't any major changes here. I think the only one is that we plan to stop shipping this intermediate image, which is the stack images that don't contain CNB metadata. And instead we will be essentially publishing the same image that contains the CNB metadata to both the tags with the CNB suffix on the end and without. And I think that's the only major change here. So check it out. But then I also saw a comment today that brought up the idea of what we're going to do for builders. And that was an open question that we hadn't answered on the Jammy Jellyfish RFC as well. Just what all these changes are going to mean for the builders. And I was just hoping that I know some of the builders maintainers are here, that we could start thinking about that maybe asynchronously and open a separate RFC to cover what that will look like for both the new changes to the Bionic stack images and also what it will look like for supporting Jammy. That's kind of a separate thing from this specific RFC.
Sophie, if you could just link somewhere like in like core dev Slack, just at builder maintainers, the comment you were discussing around what we're going to do inside of builders. I didn't see any of that discussion, so it'd be helpful.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Okay, next up, move web server promotion to top level.
Yeah, so this is on request from Ryan, based on the fact that this is an RFC to introduce a new language family. It's a bit, the protocol was a bit unclear. I initially opened and had this merged in the web servers sub-team RFCs. However, Ryan requested that I actually basically reopen it and move it into the top level RFC, as it's proposing the introduction of a new meta build pack or language family. So I've complied with that, moved it up. I don't think that there's anything that needs to be done. It's a pretty straightforward promotion RFC, which is to basically move the thing, rename where it goes on the various registries. The only maybe slightly tricky bit is that it is replacing some of the logic that we have in the full builder as it exists currently. So we will be removing like standalone HTTP and Nginx and replacing it with a web server, who as part of their order grouping have standalone Nginx and HTTPD. It's the only gotcha really, but yeah, pretty straightforward.
I can leave this as a comment, but would it be possible to leave the old page in place since we merged it with a link to the new one? Because we almost this close to publishing a blog post with the link broken right after we published it.
Sorry, can you say that again?
I was just wondering if we could leave the old file in place and link to the new one instead of removing it.
Oh, like inside the contents?
Yeah.
Sure. I'll just have to go in and make that change.
Just so we don't reassign the number accidentally. And so if we link out to it, the links don't break when we move it.
Yeah, I'll do that right after this meeting.
Right. Great. Seems like that's it in terms of RFCs. There's a pretty new one, but it's in a draft state from team. Okay, anything else you would like to share here, discuss?
I might need to read it, but I'd be interested in why the stack bomb RFC is blocked. It sounds like about providing an SBOM for the stack, which is pretty interesting.
It's blocked on the CNB specification upstream. There was, for a period of time, in existing RFC in CNB that outlined an addition of an SBOM to the stack. And that has, after further discussion, it appears it's moving more towards using cosign and having a cosign integration in order to basically assert that an SBOM belongs to a particular image. And so we're basically, we have the outlines of what we think we would want for this particular thing, but we're kind of waiting for the CNB folks to figure out what direction they're going to be heading in before we implement anything. This was mostly written because we thought it was very close or imminent to land in the CNB space, and then that ended up not happening.
Okay, understood.
I think some of the motivation behind why this was changing on the CNB side is that it can be hard to get the right like the original specification required you to bake the SBOM into the image, which requires special tooling. You can't, build the image and then generate it afterwards. And also there's some concern about how it plays into like the Dockerfile extension features that Ozzy was talking about. where if you're running those extensions, it could be incorrect, the one you baked in. So it's about keeping it outside the image and allowing platforms to regenerate with tooling if that's appropriate.
Might also just be worth pointing out that we have like a version of what's in this blocked RFC implemented. It's just turned off. So all of our stacks that we publish don't have the SBOM, but there is a flag that you can turn on in the, not easy to turn on, but there is a flag you can turn on to add an SBOM of the type that's like described in this blocked RFC if you wanted to see what that would look like in practice. But actually it'll be much easier once the new stack descriptor pull request lands and we have like a nice tool to create stacks. You can set that environment variable for the experimental SBOM and see what that looks like. But I don't think that this RFC specifically will ever actually get merged at this point. So it might just make more sense for me to close it out.
Is there any objection to close it out?
We can always open it back up if we need to, right? So
it sounds a bit like if we will have something coming from upstream from the CNB spec, we will probably want to have the same RFC number that we currently already use for the feature of having a stack bomb, but not sure if that's relevant.
you don't typically assign the RFC number until it merges.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's not based on the PR number like some folks do.
Okay.
Right. Thank you. All right, anything else? No? Awesome. Thank you all for your time, for input. It was a great session. Hope to see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.